Hey, welcome back. This is Strata Conference, O'Reilly Media's exclusive coverage with SiliconANGLE Wikibon. I'm John Furrier. I'm joined with my co-host.
I'm Dave Vellante of Wikibon.org, and this is a special deep dive segment. We're here with the storage alchemist, who is Steve Kenniston. Steve's actually with IBM, but he's here. He's a longtime friend of theCUBE. Really has used to be an independent analyst and brings that perspective. He's been at the show, crawling around, talking to practitioners, talking to technologists, former CTO, and Steve, thanks for coming on.
Thanks a lot, Dave, I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I think this is your first Strata, right?
This is my first Strata.
So what do you think? I mean, what have you seen? Maybe give us the take from the show. We get the deep dives on theCUBE, but we don't spend as much time, in the side sessions as you have.
Yeah, Dave, so I think it's really interesting. I came here with, again, it being my first Strata, not having a lot of expectations and trying to understand, where the world is going with big data. My approach has really been from the aspect of what's the hardware side look like? What is the, you see EMC, you see NetApp, you see a lot of the vendors talking about the big iron that it's going to take to kind of drive big data and what it's going to take. And I really wanted to understand that and understand what the technologies were, the underlying technologies and data storage technologies were going to be for that. I haven't heard a lot about that at the show, this year. What I've been hearing a lot of is what's the software, how is the data going to really be valuable to your organization, how do you extract the value from it, where does the data go, how does it live, where does it die, what's the governance of that data. A lot of that, but not a lot around the where is it stored and how do I manage that. The data management of big data, I think, is going to be very crucial to how IT shops actually then turn that information set over to the folks that need to consume that and actually extract the value. It's going to be difficult.
Well, you mentioned software. I mean, you're seeing everything as software-led, right? I mean, we've been talking about that a lot, and it sounds like that's exactly what you're seeing at this event.
Exactly. It's been all about the software components that actually help you suck the data from the different open source communities, pull it into some data repository, and then go apply the analysis on top of that. And it's very interesting. This whole software-led X, whether it be software-led infrastructure, software-led storage, you're hearing more and more about the capabilities. And I always talk about the storage services, the value components that sit on top of the spinning, IBM doesn't necessarily always like it, but I call it the spinning rust, right? But at the end of the day, it's the software that adds the value, and we're hearing a lot more about the software, these software applications or software capabilities that, for example, like inside of Hadoop or MapR, having things like snapshotting capabilities, replication capabilities. Now, if that's the case, do I want to spend for an expensive storage array? Well, in some cases you do, right? From a performance standpoint or from a security standpoint or from a speed of getting things done standpoint. But if I can, I know it's going to grow exponentially, so hard, so fast, and I really want to control my costs, where do I end up spending my money? I want to spend it in the valuable stuff, and that typically ends up being the software.
So, I mean, you've worked at some big iron companies, right? I mean, IBM obviously sells a lot of big iron, EMC sells a lot of big iron. You've also worked at some software companies. You were at Veritas and others. So what do you think? I mean, we've seen for the last couple of decades, the industry has marked up Seagate disk drives, right? But the value has been in the software, but that software's been locked inside of the array, for example. So what do you see happening going forward? How do companies continue to thrive and continue to get the types of margins that they've been used to, or does that go away?
I think you hear a lot more about the commoditization of everything, and the commoditization of data, the commoditization of software, but more importantly, you're hearing about more and more about the commoditization of the hardware, right? The commodity hardware is becoming where I start to, especially in the big data world, where I start to deploy a lot of my applications and extract a lot of the value from the data. It's not the spinning disks that actually sit on the floor. So I think you have to play this balance. You play this balance between getting the margins you can from the value that's in the software and offsetting it from the value or the margins that you're not going to make necessarily in the hardware.
So is it the case that the traditional storage guys are not here in force because they're not selling their hardware and they haven't figured this model out yet? Is that a different part of the organization that has to figure that stuff out? I mean, for instance, obviously Greenplum's here in a big way. Is that what companies have to do, is to sort of transform themselves to take advantage of that software-led infrastructure, or get crushed?
No, I do think there needs to be a little bit of a transformation, a big transformation. So, you think about the fact that, data protection, and we've talked a lot about data protection in the past. You talk about data protection capabilities slowly moving into the software, but at the end of the day, I need some back-end repository in order to be able to store that. Well, the question is, maybe for data protection, it's kind of an offshoot, but when I store that information, where is it going? Dave Floyer, Wikibon analyst, right, wrote a great piece called FLAPE, right? It's this combination of flash storage, right, and tape. So tape is very inexpensive. It's an inexpensive media for storing vast amounts of information, and then you have flash, which is really important for extracting the value out of your big data repository in a very, very fast manner. So if I can then move what might be then stale information to that secondary repository, right, with some smart software, I still need to invest in that secondary repository. And then that brings to light the question, all right, so now I have flash-based capabilities sitting up front on all flash array, for example, where I can really start to leverage and extract the value from the software. So before you say, do the vendors really need to start to understand or kind of worry about themselves that are selling the big iron get taken out? I don't necessarily think that's the case. We've all seen technology kind of evolve, and the next evolution is going to be, for example, these all-flash arrays. It's now becoming, and again, David Floyer wrote a nice piece about this, where these all-flash arrays can be so much less expensive when trying to drive, big data or data that sits on, on top of a database. It can be a lot less expensive to run it in an all-flash array versus perhaps maybe running it in a spinning disk array, right? So now you're going to see these transformations start to take place, combined with software, and then how do I continue to leverage the hardware in the back end, for example, like tape.
And we've heard a lot about in-memory databases this week, John, and Flash is obviously playing a role for metadata and
Well, I mean, I
fast
think,
access
Dave, what's here is interesting. What Storage Alchemist is kind of teasing out here is, and Steve, is that software-led is a thesis that we put forth. Wikibon in particular wrote the first research paper. Again, another seminal moment in groundbreaking research from Wikibon. That's not software defined. It's not, because it's not defined. Software defined networking, software defined infrastructure is where everyone's going. It's certainly not defined, so I think software led's a better term, but here, appliances are kind of passe, although DDN is more of a higher end one on HPC, which totally makes sense, but in general, the storage equation is interesting. Software is a big part of it, but no one's talking about some of the things like compression, and we've had these conversations with Steve before. And the storage aspect is really, really impactful here because developers just want it to work, right? They don't want to deal with under the covers BS around management and dealing with data transformations and different data sets working differently because of some proprietary hook. So Steve, I want to ask you that on that, comment on that from a perspective of, storage should be just a place where data goes, but the latency and throughput are huge issues, right? You got virtualization out there, you got some compression. How do you look at the latency and the throughput issue? Some are claiming great performances and saying, but they're not counting latency. The throughput numbers are great, but latency is horrible, right? So,
yeah, I think what you're seeing is what we're hearing a lot about, and I think you brought up a very good point, John, right? At the end of the day, what is the customer looking for, right? And at the end of the day, they don't want to have to deal with all the integration components. I think about 10 years ago, I was an analyst with the Enterprise Strategy Group, and we talked about, and that's when the IBM SVC platform was originally launched, okay, so 10 years ago. The first thing everybody came out and started talking about is, hey, this is a really great set of capabilities. It would be awesome if we had a disk array or a set of disk shelves that were underneath it, so that it was just easy to all manage in one kind of block of capabilities. Now what's happening? You're starting to see that smart software, for example, be extracted further into a platform like an SVC, and now it's heterogeneous. So now I can do all the things that I really want to do. One simple set of management capabilities sitting on top of all of my disk. And then I can make the more difficult decisions. So now I say, okay, now what am I looking for? As a consumer, I'm now looking for performance. Well, if I can virtualize everything underneath that, if I can virtualize all of my storage and have my flash also play a part of that entire virtualization tree, and then migrate data down to my lower cost storage, I can control my costs. It's simple to manage, right, which is what consumers want, and I'm getting the performance that I require. And at the end of the day, John, you're exactly right. When it comes to this big data thing, speed is end up being your competitive advantage, right? So if I can get better performance, and I'm going to need that better performance to get that answer sooner, to make that business decision sooner, to get that data so that I can drive my business, that's what I'm looking for.
What have been some of the most interesting conversations that you've heard in the marketplace out here in the hallways? I mean, obviously, you know, O'Reilly Media is known for having really amazing thought leadership conferences. Obviously, the program's phenomenal, a lot of alpha geeks, but now you have the bottoms up community growing fast, top down, and all the actions kind of happening at the intersection of that. But it's the hallway conversations that people want to know about. Okay, what are you hearing?
So I think, actually I want to take it from a different perspective. I want to talk about a little bit about what I'm not hearing about, right? So what I'm actually not hearing about is the fact that if we take a step back and we look at how cloud really evolved, right? Cloud was this concept, and then a lot of the big iron folks, they got involved in cloud, and then they started selling cloud to very large vendors, right? So big companies were deploying cloud, and then now you're starting to see 3, 4, 5 years later, it's trickling down to the small to medium enterprise. And at the end of the day, when you kind of break apart all the fanciness and you figure out what does cloud really mean, you hear it means like I need agility in my business, I need flexibility, I need scalability. Well, I think big data is the opposite. And what I'm not hearing is I'm hearing a lot of big data is huge, it's big, it's massive, I need to extract information, I need to figure all this out. But what I'm not hearing about is the fact, so let's take a quick example. I was just in Vietnam about 3 months ago. And they asked me, what were you here to speak about? And I said, I'm here to speak about big data. And they said, well, we don't really have big data here in Vietnam. We're a small country and we're not collecting a lot of information. But the reality is people just don't understand of all these open APIs. I actually have the ability to suck in important pieces of content, munge that with some of my business analysis tools that I have already, maybe my sales database, and extract some real value from that. And it doesn't have to be hundreds of terabytes or petabytes of information. It can be a few terabytes of information. So I would really like to see, and I'm not hearing this, but I actually really believe, and I did hear a little bit of this walking around, is that I think small companies who take advantage of big data, the concept of big data and utilizing big data and utilizing that information to make better business decisions can really compete. Small banks could now really compete with folks like Bank of America or Citibank, and actually, I don't want to say do damage, but actually, grow and be very successful because they understand a lot about their businesses, they understand a lot about their customers, that sort of thing.
You said to me last night that one of the things you heard at the conference is that you sense that some marketeers at large organizations, certain large organizations, are afraid of big data. On the other hand, you have this meme of how the CMO is going to outspend the CIO in big data. So what did you mean by that, and where did that come from?
So I heard a really interesting conversation, or a really interesting presentation from someone from Accenture, right? So Accenture, you were just talking in your last segment a little bit about the fact that services, services led, right? That's pretty big. Well, Accenture is really all about services. But they had some statistics about the fact that you can go out and gather all of this information, and a lot of this information is being driven by IT. So you might have a line of business manager come in and they might start talking a little bit about, okay, we've helped you, we've collected this information, then they hand that data over. But okay, I've got this information, but I wasn't necessarily the one. The marketeer wasn't the one asking the question to the data set. So now I've got some answers, but I don't really know what to do with those answers. So I quickly have to retreat to what I know best and just go do my marketing project. So I do think there's a lot of services that need to be involved to help folks ask better questions of that data set in order to be able to then turn that into real value and make decisions using that information.
So you also said that you feel like startups are in a better position to leverage big data. So what did you mean by that, and what are you seeing?
I think startups have a lot of flexibility. I think they have a lot of innovation, and I think they know better what questions that they want to ask to data sets, and they know what data sets they want to go out and collect to then ask that question to then move their business to the next level. Whereas I think big corporations kind of get sedentary and kind of stuck in their ways. They don't necessarily always know what to ask.
Okay, Steve, final comment. We're going to break here and end our news hour, power hour here. Final comment, make it brief, bumper sticker, storage innovation here at Strata, what's happening and what needs to be worked on. Give us your quick soundbite.
I really want to see what we can do in the $150,000 range, sub $150,000 range to implement a solution, and if that's from a hardware standpoint, to implement a solution for small to medium-sized businesses to be able to be super competitive in this highly competitive world where it's just not all about the cash. It's really about being flexible and about being knowledgeable.
Okay, this is SiliconANGLE's exclusive coverage. That's our Power Hour prime time here, 12 to 1. At every CUBE event, you'll see us. We're going to break down the news analysis for 1 hour, and that's going to be the full package. And then we're back to our in-depth blanket coverage day to day. This is day 2 of 3 days of wall-to-wall coverage, 9 to 5 every day, live here at Strata Conference, co-produced with O'Reilly Media. This is theCUBE, SiliconANGLE's flagship program. We'll go out to the event, extract the signal from the noise. We'll be right back with our next spotlight segments after the short break.